G'day everyone, and welcome to video 4.2.1 for the Legal Studies guy, flying through, and we're up to the last area of study for the year. If you're watching this straight off the bat, about 6 weeks or so, 6-7 weeks to go in term 3, sorry, but obviously finishing up early in term 4, so nearly there. Our quote today, fantastic quote, really like this one: "Do not wait to strike till the iron is hot, but make it hot by striking." This is that a play on that old saying of strike while the iron is hot. The whole idea of, once the motivation, I suppose, is there and once things are in place, then that's when you go for it. I'm much more of the view of, just keep turning up. Don't worry about motivation. It's effectively bullshit. Just do, even if it's bad work, just do something, as opposed to sitting around and waiting for, that perfect moment when the stars align and be like, oh, I'm actually motivated now, I'll do it. Stuff that. Just get it done, no matter how you're feeling. So, as it says, don't wait till the iron is hot, just get it done. Make the iron hot by striking. So, 4.2.1, area 4.2 is going to focus exclusively on effectively law reform and making law, so Parliament making law and the courts making law as well. And we start straight off by looking at factors that affect the ability of Parliament to make law. So this is quite similar to a dot point we looked at in 4.1, which was how the Constitution places a check on Parliament, so ways the Constitution stops Parliament making law effectively. And again, we're looking at some similar things. So we're going to look at the role of the Houses of Parliament. It's a little bit of that bicameral structure. Couple of new ones: representative nature of Parliament and political pressures, and then restrictions on the lawmaking of Parliament. And that'll be ticking off some things from the last area of study as well. Our skill here is the need to discuss the factors that affect the ability of Parliament and courts to make law. So, as always with the discussion, how these are actually impacts, how these do actually affect the ability, but also how they don't. So, representative nature of Parliament, the idea is that it affects the ability to make laws because you've got to pass laws that people like or you'll get voted out, obviously. But generally, a government is elected based on what the people want, so they're not really restricted from doing those things. That whole idea of looking at both sides. Essential question: what factors affect the ability of Parliament to make law? And at the end of this, you should be able to answer that. So, roles of the Houses of Parliament is the first factor, and we're going to go through this the same way we did the constitutional checks on lawmaking, both looking at what it is, so what are the roles, and then how does it affect the ability of Parliament to make law. I shouldn't need to go over this. Roles of the House of Parliament was the key knowledge point for 4.1.1. You probably had some questions on it on your last SAC. What are the roles of the House of Reps? What are the roles of the Senate, Legislative Council, Legislative Assembly, etc.? Pretty straightforward, just listed them again. Key ones here. This is about the ability of Parliament to make law. How does it affect the ability of Parliament to make law? And we know that the key role of the lower house and the upper house is to initiate and make laws, number one. But then they have roles outside of that. So represent the people, be a house of government, and the upper house to be a house of review. I haven't included the States House there for the Senate because we're just trying to look at the upper house as a whole, but I'll talk about them both. I'll talk about the Senate a little bit separately in a moment as well. So how do these roles affect the ability of Parliament to make law? It's that whole straightforward thing of rarely is there a majority achieved in both houses. That means that in order for a law to be passed, the upper house has to scrutinise it, review it, and it has to make sure the law has support from a spread of political views. So generally, if the government of Malcolm Turnbull at the moment wants to pass a law through or legislation through the Senate, they either have to get the Labor Party to agree to it, which does actually surprisingly happen on most pieces of legislation. Both political parties agree, and then it goes through. So you've got a spread of views there, just right of centre with the Liberal Party and just left of centre with Labor. But potentially Labor says no, and then if the Malcolm Turnbull government does want to pass legislation through the Senate, they have to get a combination of independents, Pauline Hanson's One Nation. There is one senator who represents Clive Palmer's United Australia Party. His name's Brian Burston. So Clive Palmer's still around and not the Palmer United Party anymore. And senators from Nick Xenophon's team, so more centre, what they call pragmatic politicians who just think about what's the best. They don't really care about ideology and stuff like that. So again, just pointing out that the upper house needs to scrutinise things, and you need to make sure there is a broad range of support to get something passed. 6-year Senate terms also help with this. So if the Liberal Party gets really, really on the nose, like people don't like them at the next election, which looks like it might happen, and we vote in a Labor government, there's still going to be a group of senators that were elected at the last election when the Liberal Party was popular that keep their jobs for another 3 years. So again, it just makes sure that the whims of people at one election don't lead to a parliament that's completely dominated by one party. And as we know, and we'll look at representative in a minute, the whole idea of representing the people means there is an added responsibility for the lower house to vote in line with the views of their electorate, or else they'll get voted out. So how do the roles of the Houses of Parliament restrict lawmaking? Well, generally you don't have a majority, so you have to actually seek support from a broad range of views. If you don't get it, as the political party in charge, you cannot pass laws because you can't get it through the Senate. And you also have to pass laws that are in line with what the people want down here, or else you'll lose the next election. And this leads us perfectly into the second point of representative nature of Parliament. What is it? How does it affect the ability of Parliament to make laws? Well, pretty simply, we are a representative democracy. A quick political ideology, I suppose, lesson for you. If Australia was a direct democracy, it would mean every time we wanted to change the law, every single member of our population would have to vote on it. So every time we wanted to make any law change, we'd have to get 25 million people to basically say yes or no. Instead of doing it that way, which doesn't really work, it's the way they used to do it in, say, in ancient Greece, for example, a direct democracy, we use what's called representative democracy, where each group of the population picks someone to represent them, and then that representative basically votes on our behalf in Parliament on these law changes. So the 25 or so million of us are represented by 150 people, and they represent an equal portion of our population. In Australia, we don't break our population up into groups based on ethnicity, religion, or anything like that. We just break the population into equally populated areas, and each of those gets a representative. So equally populated areas ensures everyone's vote carries equal weight. In other countries around the world, for example, and I'm not 100% across it in recent years, it could have changed, but in a country like Lebanon, where effectively when borders were drawn, creating Lebanon after World War II, it was an area where there were sort of, I suppose, some really distinct ethnic and religious groups that we kind of just said, oh, you're a country now. So when they constructed their parliament, these different ethnic groups and religious groups actually vote for their own representatives, as opposed to breaking it into equally populated areas of population. So I think the Maronites will elect some members of the parliament. The Muslims will elect some members of the parliament. Other Christian groups will elect some members of the parliament, etc., as opposed to it being purely based on a spread of population. But in Australia, we do it just on a spread of population to ensure that everyone's vote carries equal weight. So, how does it affect the ability of Parliament to make laws? So straightforward, this one. If Parliament passes a law that the public disapproves of, we will vote for someone else. Easy. Ensures our law reforms in line with public interests. Nothing else to add there. Political pressures. This is a really interesting one. What is it? How does it affect the ability of Parliament to make laws? Well, obviously there's pressure from voters, and you've got to vote in line with what the public want. But politicians actually face a lot of pressures from within their political party, so party politics. They also face political pressure around controversial topics. So the idea that what do the people actually want? There might be some really vocal groups about certain controversial topics. Same-sex marriage is an example of this. And they also have to worry about short-term voter interest. So what might be actually good for the long term of the country versus what's going to get them re-elected. So how does it affect the ability of Parliament to make law? I've got a couple of links on this one later to show you, but these two here, these first two, are really, really interesting points that you might not have heard about or considered before. So whilst we look at politics and think that everyone in the Liberal Party agrees on things and everyone in the Labor Party agrees on things and they all vote together, actually each of those political parties has different mini groups inside of them that have really, really different views on things. And these mini little groups are always fighting with each other. Strangely enough, the major parties fight with each other, and then within each party they fight with each other. So I've got some articles that I'll link you later, but currently there's a group in the Liberal Party who call themselves effectively the Conservative faction. And it's a group of the Liberal Party that are really, really conservative. Tony Abbott's part of this. And they were very vocally opposed to same-sex marriage. They're the group that wants to, still makes noise about abortion laws. They don't think we should, they don't think abortion should be legalised. And therefore, certain bits of legislation or certain law reform ideas might not actually ever make it to Parliament if it doesn't get through the political party itself. So how do political pressures influence the ability of Parliament to make law? Well, sometimes law or law reform doesn't even make it to Parliament because of internal politics within a party. As well as this, political pressures are the idea that politicians are unwilling to legislate in controversial areas. They fear voter backlash, and they particularly fear the vocal, I suppose, the amount of media attention that can come from minority groups who feel like, a controversial area has been changed to go against them. Same-sex marriage was a really, really interesting one. There was obviously a very, very vocal group of people who are quite religious who believe that we shouldn't have same-sex marriage. Obviously a very, very vocal group of LGBTI people and supporters who believe that same-sex marriage should be legalised. And it would be safe to say that these two groups either of them weren't in the majority. There was a large group of people in the middle who probably just didn't care that much. But politicians were really unwilling to change the law around same-sex marriage because if they did, this really conservative group would get really, really vocal, and there would be lots of, campaigning to get rid of the group that changed the law. But they were also facing this really, really vocal group of LGBTI people and supporters who were being really, really vocal about changing it. So, bit of a catch-22. What do you do? And a lot of politicians just decided to leave it. We don't really want to touch it. Someone else can sort it out. So political pressures can affect the ability of Parliament to make laws again because they might not want to make laws in controversial areas. Finally, short-term voter interest. How does it affect the ability to make laws? Well, often politicians won't make law reform changes that have a future view because they might have short-term effects that people don't like. A big one for this is climate change. There are some politicians who believe climate change isn't real. There are some politicians who believe climate change is real and that we should make immediate changes to things in our country to try and fix it. And there are some politicians who probably sit in the middle who think climate change is real, but any change we make to try and make the future better is going to have some short-term impacts. Like it might lead to higher energy prices, it might lead to spending more money on renewables, and the public aren't going to like that. So we're not going to touch it. We're not even going to look at making a law change there because short-term voter interest might lead to us getting voted out. So politicians might be unwilling to make laws for future issues because they are worried about the short-term impact of that. Finally, lawmaking restrictions. This one's a really straightforward one. Parliament is the supreme lawmaking body within its jurisdiction, but it doesn't have ultimate lawmaking power. It can't make laws about absolutely anything because the certain areas of the Constitution, such as express rights, so Section 116, 117, 92, 80, and 51, Clause 29, I think. Basically, all these things Parliament can't make laws on, so they're restricted. And they also can't change the Constitution of their own volition. States particularly are restricted from making laws in areas of exclusive power. So they can't develop their own military, they can't coin their own currency, etc. But there's also those restrictions imposed by Section 109, so they can't make laws that contradict current Commonwealth law, so that affects their ability to make law as well. Again, if they make a law that breaches express rights, Commonwealth Parliament, for example, or if the states make a law in an area of exclusive power, if the states make a law that contravenes a federal law, and Section 109 comes into play, all those things, the High Court can declare that legislation invalid if it is beyond the power of the Parliament to make it. This is our skill. Discuss the factors that affect the ability of Parliament and courts to make law. So obviously get rid of the courts. Discuss the factors that affect the ability of Parliament to make law. So we know we need to look at both sides. And here's the sort of questions that maybe we might see. Now, obviously I'm going to scrub out this part because we're not up to it yet. But this was a question from 2014. And it was discuss the ability of Parliament to change the law. Pretty straightforward. And it kind of lines up with this. Discuss the ability of Parliament to make laws. Okay? Obviously, factors that affect is in there as well, but kind of just discuss the ability of Parliament to make law. Or we could get a question that's much more specific. Discuss how the representative nature of Parliament affects its ability to make law. So we could get a question just to discuss that particular factor. This is what the examiners said in 2014 were the factors around Parliament's ability to make law. So strengths being how could Parliament make law, and weaknesses being how couldn't they. And some of them are relevant to what we've just done. Particularly this first one. We can see that Parliament is elected by the people. Therefore, it has to represent the people through changing the law. Okay? So this is actually a factor that affects their ability to make law. They need to represent the people. These ones don't so much fit with the current. These ones, it can make laws for the future as need arises, but we know it's restricted by the short-term voter interest and the need to get elected at the next election. And if there is a majority in either in the Senate or the Legislative Council, laws can be passed easily. So what we've just looked at. But particularly some of these weaknesses of Parliament making law really line up with the factors we just looked at. If we get rid of those two, the things we just went through, often there are conflicting views about when change is necessary. So Parliament might be reluctant to make law. So this affects their ability to make law. The lawmaking process is long because there are two houses, so that fits into the roles of the houses of Parliament. Long process to make laws, therefore this affects the ability of Parliament to make law. Parliament is restricted by the Constitution, affects the ability of Parliament to make law, so restrictions. Members might be required to vote on Parliament on party lines, so they might just have to vote with the political party no matter what. And Parliament's not always up to date with societal needs. So again, Parliament might be affected in its ability to make laws because politicians aren't up to speed or don't want to look at controversial areas. What I've done that hopefully helps is I've broken this down, and obviously there's a lot of information in this table, and I'm not going to read through it all in the interest of time, but obviously pause this and have a look at it. This table is based on each of those 4 points they gave us, in case we get a question specifically on each one. How Parliament is affected. So their ability to make law is affected. So this is kind of like, almost like, in a way, and I'm kind of like to write this because I don't want to confuse people, but I'll put it up there anyway. In a way, Parliament's weaknesses. So how is it affected to its ability to make law affected? Legislation has to be really negotiated, so their ability to make law is affected. Some people would say that's actually a good thing, which is why I didn't want to write weakness, but it is a way that their ability to make law is affected. We can also look at how it's not affected, and this whole idea of, say, with representative nature, the public's likely to elect a parliament or a government whose policies they agree with. Therefore, it's not actually going to be restricted from legislating in these areas. Whilst they have to make laws that the public like, generally we pick politicians that we like. Therefore, there's no restriction there. They can go and do what they want. They have the ability to make laws in the areas that the public have said they have the ability to. So have a look at this, look at both sides, how these factors affect the ability to make law and also how they don't. As I said, links to a news.com article on factions in the ALP. It's an old one. It's from like 2011, I think. Still mentions Kevin Rudd. But this whole idea that within the Labor Party, which is just left of centre, there are also people who are more right-wing and more left-wing. And this one's only from last month. Sorry, depends on when you're watching. This one's only from June 2018. Factions in the Liberal Party of Australia. And again, looking at the idea of the Liberal Party is just right of centre, but within that there are people that are really, really right-wing, really conservative, and there are people who are much more progressive. Malcolm Turnbull is a more progressive Liberal, Tony Abbott, much more conservative Liberal. It's a big dot point because there's a big skill involved. What are the factors that affect the ability of Parliament to make law? Hopefully you can run through and explain each of these four, because you could just get asked a direct question like that. But you can also start to talk about how they do affect Parliament's ability and how they don't. Welcome to Area 4.2 again. I hope you had a great Area 4.1 and you're hitting your ground running with 4.2. We're nearly there. If this is exam revision, then you're doing the right thing, covering off this old stuff, and best of luck. This has been another video for the Legal Studies Guy. Like, subscribe, comment, all of those things. Love interacting with people out there if they've got thoughts on what they're doing. Cheers.